What is up, guys? Welcome back to the ANAK podcast. Now, before we actually jump into the episode, I just wanted to come on here with a couple quick announcements. First off, you may be able to guess by the fact that you're listening to this, but there is a new season of the podcast in the works, and I haven't been more excited to film episodes of the podcast. We are switching it up a little bit. It is going to be a bit of a different show, a different format, but I think you're really going to like it. Whether you're just getting started with music production or whether you are deep into it and have been doing it for years, I think there's lots to learn from all different kinds of creators, different inspiration and insight, and just things you can try or just learn from. So that is what's coming up on the podcast. I don't want to say too much right now, but just know that it's very exciting. The way that I look at the new format is, this is what I'll say. It's kind of like a coffee break with creators. Those coffee breaks when you're just sitting in the studio lounge and just chatting about stuff to do with the session. That's what I want the new season to feel like. So I'm getting used to it. I am working on it, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So that's the announcement that I'm really excited, and I just wanted to share with you before we get into the actual episode. Anyway, for now, here is an episode to kind of tide you over and give you a little bit of an insight into the new format. But anyway, without further ado, let's dive into the episode. What is up, people of the Musicverse? Welcome back to the ANAK podcast. My name is Alex Krotz, and this is my show about creativity, music production, and audio engineering. This episode, I'm joined by Emmett O'Reilly and Malcolm Cottle to discuss a very ambitious project that plays into an interesting release strategy for Emmett O'Reilly's new solo record. Emmett has released many records with various bands he's a part of, including Pew Pew Pew, Owen Wilson, Stuck Out Here, and many more, frankly. His latest release, which we're talking about today, is his new solo EP called My Vacation. This record, which came out recently in September, had a very interesting release, including 3 different versions of the songs as promotional material. And we dive into how he sees those various versions as opportunities to let the songs live and continue to grow. Now, one of those versions is a new Live Off the Floor recording, which is mostly the same band that played the record almost 5 years ago. And that is included in a cinematic short film concept music video project called Anxious Attachment. This short film was created with, directed, filmed, and edited by Malcolm Cottle. And today we're going to chat about the inspiration and creative process behind that and how they actually managed to pull it off. With a whole bunch of changes along the way, it definitely has some twists and turns and just funny stories along the way. And of course, I have to ask what they learned from this whole experience, what they're most proud of, and what their biggest lessons are that they took away. And of course, would they do this again? Now, if you have not seen the film and want to know what we're talking about, it's only about 8 minutes long, and the link will be in the show notes, so you can go check it out and see what we're talking about. Now, I will say that I do have a bit of insider information for this conversation because I did help with the filming, and it was just such a great, fun experience with such a great team. It is a great conversation, and I think you'll pull a lot of inspiration away from this for whatever ambitious project you want to take on next. With that, let's dive into it. Emmett O'Reilly and Malcolm Cottle, welcome to the ANAK podcast. Once again, both of you have been on here before, but it's nice to have you both together. Today, we're going to talk about some really cool stuff. First off, I just wanted to step back a little bit and talk to Emmett for a second about the actual original record. I just wanted to get you to talk a little bit about what the record is about and how the record kind of came to be, because it's very unique. It's very short. It's 3 songs. It's got a runtime of all of 5 minutes or something, but there's a lot packed into it.
Totally. Okay, so big question. All the songs were written in 2017, and considering it's such a short burst of music, it kind of seems crazy that it took so long for it to come out. It was all kind of written around a pretty intense summer. I won't get into it too much because everybody can obviously make their own interpretations on what the songs are about and things like that. But for me, I finished off a summer and sort of went, "Whoa, that was a doozy." Emotionally, and there was a lot of traveling, and there was just a lot of stuff going on, and so not too long after that, I would say maybe like a year or so later, I got together with 2 of my roommates, Con Gunisberg and Ian Cully, and Tristan Henderson, and we recorded at Studio 69 downtown with our friend Chester, and just did those 3 songs in a day, I guess. I guess we did all the beds in a day, and I think I went back another day and recorded the vocals. Tristan really wanted to mix it, and I remember we did there were a lot of variations. I remember being like kind of even happy at a certain point, and Tristan was just like, no, this isn't right yet. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And in the meantime, the first EP came out, and a couple other things came out, like, a Stuck Out Here record and Pew Records and Respire Records and stuff like that. So it was busy, and then the pandemic kind of hits.
I feel like that's just an asterisk on every story you tell these days. It's like, these things caught up,
Yeah.
and then the COVID happened. So
Yeah.
It absolutely, I don't think anyone can deny that, like, it gave a pretty unique opportunity to assess the things that you could actually change in your life or like take care of. And one of those things for me was these, I've said it a few times in the process of releasing this, is I don't really love necessarily being like the solo guy, being the center of attention. But I do really like these songs, and I believe in these songs, and that was something that became pretty apparent to me over the pandemic, was that I wanted to do something with these recordings. So my solo project is definitely something that I'm a little more precious about. I'm a little more particular about who I collaborate with, and I wasn't really looking this time around to like try and work with a label or anything like that. That made me start thinking of different ways you can promote something, and different ways that you can make an exciting release. And obviously at this point I'm definitely talking with Malcolm, because Malcolm has a lot of great ideas on this, and I feel like this was sort of the beginning of us kind of brainstorming Anxious Attachment.
The record itself is obviously 3 songs. It's very short, and you said you wrote it kind of about that summer and what happened. Did you write it at the time? Obviously, the Anxious Attachment video wasn't a thought at that point, but at the time, did you write it as a kind of a concept record? What was that kind of thing like? Because obviously it works together in the end.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I was a little vague when you were kind of asking what it was about. I mean, the first 2 songs are about the same thing. They're about like a breakup, a particular person. It was kind of a like a long distance relationship, and so the third song is about when I got home from that breakup, basically, and getting some bad news upon getting home. And so it was kind of just like I'm musing on this idea of like I'm back here in my safe space after kind of getting like thrown away a little bit, and it's not maybe as safe as it was, which sounds maybe a little bleak or whatever. But I find, yeah, those are definitely the times when I tend to write the most, or when I feel like I have something to kind of get out of me. Yeah. So that was definitely a big confusing summer, I would say. Yeah. And so it was nice to be able to address that in a way that was positive, and in ways where like I again love the songs that came out of it. I think they're pretty catchy and pretty fun, really, yep, considering that they're made from such confusing feelings.
I remember him kind of sending it to me and sort of, offering his musings and kind of what he thought of it and what he wanted to do with it and stuff like that. I remember being very struck by the fact that the subject matter seemed very sad, but that the songs were so upbeat. And that there was kind of this juxtaposition of like, upbeat melancholy, I think is what we referred to it, or, something like that.
I totally agree with you. That is a really good way to put it, actually, because you don't think about it, at least I didn't when I was first listening to it. The tracks don't feel sad at all, but then you start looking at the thing and you're like, these lyrics are a little bit maybe sadder than I thought they were to begin with. So, yeah.
Emmett, if you don't mind, I have a question for you, just kind of on a more personal level, because you mentioned quite a few things. One is you're very well known for playing with big acts like Pew 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 and Respire and Stuck Out Here. But you also mentioned that you don't like being necessarily like the one in the spotlight. But you feel like you had a need to get these songs out. Why do you continue to write your own material, given that you have pretty large commitments to, big acts? Why do you feel the need to take the time to still write your own music that is 100% Emmett O'Reilly. I'm just curious if you could comment on that a little bit.
It's a good question. And I might have a different answer for you depending on the day. But I kind of look at it as like a place that I can put stuff that doesn't really fit. When I started doing it, I remember when I was writing the songs that ended up being the first EP, I was like really inspired by, Mike and Ryan and Ivan and Cam, and I was really trying to write songs for the bands. And they didn't turn out right. And I was like, well, I like these songs, but they aren't really like good for the band. So that was why I decided to, put them out as a solo project. And then, that kind of like has flipped on me a little bit, I would say, in the sense of like, I feel a lot more comfortable writing songs for those bands now. And I think that I can, and I do, and I will continue to. Obviously, once I get past these other songs that I think are, for whatever reason, I feel like they're Emmett O'Reilly solo songs. Like, I kind of just want to be able to put out anything I am experimenting with.
You say you don't want to be as much of the spotlight and so to speak. But yet with this record, I feel, at least from looking from the outside in, you really upped your game with the release and the release strategy and how you went about actually putting it out. Because on your first record, which I was a part of making, you put it out, you did some promotion for it, but it wasn't nearly as so much stuff around it. But yet for this one, you did a vinyl pressing, you did those backyard sessions, which were super cool. You did this massive video short film project. There seemed to be a lot of stuff, some custom merch. You did like a mini tour to promote it. There was just so much more. It felt like so much more, at least. But yet you say you're not as into being the spotlight. Is there a reason you still wanted to do this? Was it more, I want to play with this and try these things? Or was it, I'm going to give it a shot and hopefully it does more than I think it's going to do? Maybe I do want to be the spot. Like, what was the thought behind putting so much effort into this?
I think I kind of alluded to the idea that I didn't want to work with a record label, for example, which is not to badmouth, particularly not to badmouth any of the record labels that I've worked with on solo stuff in the past, because those have been like friend labels, like people that chipped in a little bit of money and like helped out with whatever I was doing or whatever. But in the past, anytime I've sort of staked my dreams on what somebody else could do to promote my album, usually I end up being a little bit disappointed.
Right.
So I think most of what I was doing here was really motivated by the desire to do a better job than I have seen in the past.
Right.
I really wanted to that was a big part of the reason why I hadn't put it out already to begin with, was because, again, I like the songs and it just didn't make sense to me to waste the release. And if I was going to put it out completely under my terms and completely being in control of it, it made sense to me to put my best foot forward, no matter how comfortable I was with it. And Malcolm will tell you there are definitely a lot of steps in this process that I was definitely not the most comfortable with, but
Right.
I am glad that I kind of pushed through and did them, because it did make for a much more like thorough and complete and satisfying release. Really, I am really proud of how it has come out.
Right. What kind of spurred because you've been sitting on it for a while, as you said, like it was so close but not quite, and you were waiting for the right thing to release it because you were doing it under your terms. What was the catalyst, I guess, that you went, now is the time?
Number one factor, I would say, is Malcolm, because
What?
Malcolm is a man of deadlines. I am not a man of deadlines, and so I start talking to him about all these ideas of like, oh, it would be cool to do this for this release or whatever, and lo and behold, he starts setting dates. So all of a sudden the shit gets done, and for me it was a big concern. Like, again, getting back to like wanting to do the release properly, I was really uptight about having all the pieces like in my hands before starting the release or before deciding on a release date. And that was a big reason why it was taking so long too, is because I was afraid to pull that trigger and decide on a date until everything was in my hands, which didn't end up happening anyway, and we can get to that in a little bit. But the other person that I think was a huge reason for that happening is Tanita, because with the first EP release, again, I get pretty weird about it. I wanted to do all the art on my own, and I'm not an artist, and I did all the art on my own, and I'm happy with how it turned out. It looks cool or whatever, but for this release, I was like throwing around some ideas, and I remember showing some early ideas to Malcolm, and I was getting like okay feedback, and I was feeling like okay about it, but it just wasn't really like that. Wasn't quite right. And I reached out to Tanita Salati, our friend, who, for anybody who doesn't know, it's Miscellaneous Creative on Instagram and all that. She I feel like it was the same day or something. It was something like ridiculously, stupidly fast. Sent me back sort of like a rough draft that was like a million times better than anything I could ever do, obviously. And also had like so many ideas for pictures and small like little stories and things I could post for content. And like I couldn't have possibly asked her to do all the things that she did because I didn't even know that you should do them, like she just came up with so many like great ideas for visuals and for things for the release. And I guess I would say she was like the artistic director of the EP or whatever at this point, because right down to like this was the thing I was talking about with not all the pieces did end up in our hands right before the release. We didn't quite have the 7 inches ready. We didn't have all the materials ready. And so she like designed the packaging from scratch, basically, like figured out how to do that, built it all, and the people, I talked to a couple people recently who like got one of the 7 inches and they're like, oh, it's like beautiful. The packaging is so cool. How'd you come up with this? It's like, Tanita just crushed it, Those two people, those are the reasons that it happened right now, I would say, is because I started talking about it to these two highly creative and motivated people, and all of a sudden it happened.
Speaking of the wonderful Mr. Malcolm Cottle, who's been sitting here patiently, let's talk about this Anxious Attachment thing. This whole project is a whole nother piece to this. Frankly, like there's a record and you put out a record and you have to do all the artwork and you have to do all this stuff for it. And it's a huge thing. And then you go, you know what? I'm going to do a whole narrative music video that is actually a short film for this whole thing. And that has a whole other set of stuff going on. So massively ambitious project. How did the concept of the video come together and the whole project, frankly?
Yeah, I would say it definitely got started, like, regardless of what you think of MGK and his music or him personally. We just thought when he released, what was it called? The album was Tickets to My Downfall, and then they released Downfall High. And I was just really blown away by the ambition of doing something like that, especially for like pop punk, which was not especially when MGK started doing stuff, was not a mainstream genre. Again, it was kind of seeing a bit of a revival, which is kind of cool. And it was just really crazy to me that he did every song from the album is in one movie with this narrative that goes through the entire thing. Like, I was just like, wow, that is something, rather than just doing, because he had also done a few single music videos, but then he did like the whole album as a film. And I just thought that was super cool. And I remember I sent it to both of you, and me and Emmett just kind of got talking about it. Like, wow, like, can you imagine doing something like that? And then Emmett was like, well, I have this 3-song EP that like we could do something similar. And honestly, I kind of blacked out after that for a few months as we started getting going. No. I don't remember I just remember that's how the conversation sort of started. And then it just really, it moved fast right after that because I want to say this was sort of in the like early spring, late winter of last year is when we started talking about this. So 2021. So we were like still kind of coming out of pandemic. So things were like starting to be possible again. And we started kind of talking basically with like, well, what would this be? What would it do? And Emmett kind of was explaining all about the EP and kind of the themes there. And we, our early initial conversations were very much, we didn't want the storyline to be too on the nose. We wanted it to be fairly interpretive. We also knew we were working with like negative budget. So any way we could, so it was very DIY. It was very indie, in that way. So like, we knew we couldn't do a lot. So we had to kind of add a lot of symbolism into everything and kind of really let the story sort of speak for itself without a lot of, quote, production value was kind of like our thinking going into it. And actually, it was it almost happened twice without happening. I don't know if you remember this, but like, we were planning it in 2021, and we had finished all of the writing and all of the pre-production planning by, I want to say, like June or July. And we were ready to do it in August, but then another project came up with Emmett that was pretty big. So we decided to put a pause on it because I just couldn't do both. They were just, the two projects were just so big. I was just like, I can't do both like back to back. I need some space. So we put the film on pause, and then we were going to do the other project, but then the other project ended up getting put on pause as well because I couldn't get over the border because my negative COVID test didn't come in time, so they wouldn't let me over the border. So we were going to do it late summer 2021, but it got pushed. We ended up deciding to do it, I think, March or May. I don't remember which, but it was supposed to get done in March or May of this year, 2022. And the week of, I want to say maybe 3 days before, Emmett calls and he's got the COVID. So I had to shut down production.
COVID strikes
It's not
again.
happening. Yep. So we had to pause production again. And so we rescheduled it for the first week in July, I think it was. So that's when we ended up shooting it.
July
Yeah.
1st
It
weekend.
was Canada Day weekend, I'm pretty sure.
Which brought its own challenges that we had not foreseen because in our minds we had scheduled this all to be done in May. So like that was a whole thing too that we can get into in sort of the filming complications.
Yeah. I want to talk about that, but I'm curious because you've said you delayed it all this time.
Mm-hmm.
Did it keep changing as you delayed it?
Yes. So
you could say that, yeah.
So it changed a lot actually. So originally it was supposed to be basically the same type of thing as Downfall High. Like it was going to just be like this narrative that we shot and then essentially 3 music videos that were happening in the background while this narrative played out over top. So like it was all going to be backtracked and just like miming like you do in a regular music video. As we got, and that held strong for about a year. That didn't change for too long. That was, and originally too, we were going through a bunch of different actors to play the quote lead role. So we were auditioning a lot of different actors and kind of throwing names around and kind of going back and forth. There was this ambitious idea to have a lot of like cameos too, from different Toronto bands and stuff like that, just to kind of appear. And like each song was going to be in like a totally different location with a totally different set and all this kind of stuff. And then the second time it got rescheduled, Emmett realized that the original players for the EP were around to do the music video, because that was also something we were struggling with, was that Emmett really wanted the original players to be in the music video, but the timing never quite lined up. We were also trying to find like basically like stand-ins for the band too, and we were kind of figuring out how to shoot around that so that it didn't imply that they were the players, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a lot of stuff we were kind of struggling with, and like locations and stuff like that too. Because I remember too, we did this with basically no budget, so like we were really like asking for favors to get into different places, et cetera, et cetera. But then eventually Emmett realized that when we finally were ready to, we finally had the dates down and we were actually going to do it, that the band was going to be in town. So Emmett was really excited about that. And instead of just having them mime the parts, he kind of, we had several long conversations about what if instead of miming, they actually re-recorded the entire EP live off the floor rather than doing like a typical music video miming. What if we did that? So that changed everything. And
As it would, yes.
the week before we were doing it, that's when this got decided. So basically we threw out all of our ideas in terms of how we were going to shoot all the performance stuff. And we decided to do it at Shea Emmett because they had all the stuff there and all the recording rigs and everything like that. And that's when it was a very last minute decision, but it ended up being the thing we really marketed the film on too, was the fact that not only was it a short film of the EP, but all 3 songs were re-recorded in one take live off the floor as well. Which I think is really cool, which I think actually puts it a step above MGK's efforts, because we went through all of that to re-record everything live off the floor for the film, which put a lot of extra pressure on the shoot weekend too, because it was a lot to pack in, it was a lot to rethink, logistically a lot more to consider.
Did the narrative still stay the same ish, or like the overall concept of the story, I guess?
Yeah. I don't think that changed all too much. What really changed was Emmett ended up stepping into the lead role. We went back on, that idea had come up early, and Emmett kind of shied away from it. He kind of wanted someone else to kind of take on that role. But then we kind of kept going back and forth. And then really when it came down to it, it was just like, it felt the most appropriate for him to play the role. You know, it was a very, as we've kind of discussed, it's a very personal story of the EP that the film kind of supports without being too on the nose about. And it just seemed the most appropriate thing for him to play his own himself, essentially. Emmett, do you want to kind of talk about the approach to the story and a little bit about it?
The starting point I remember was that I thought about making a video for Overboard that was basically like I do a lot of running, and running down to the beach. There's a beach near my house. That's usually what I do every day or so. And so I sort of thought it's such a fast, high energy charging kind of song. It'd be cool to do a sped up or some kind of version of me running down to the beach or something, and there's a video, but then I get thinking about it and I go, well, that's clearly not a story. That's a start, that's the starting point
to
the story.
We've been talking about a few different music video ideas, because I remember too we had a one take idea of you sped up just restringing your guitar. Do you remember that? That was an idea one time too.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And then the video is just Emmett restringing his guitar, and then he just plays the last chord, and that's the video. So we were kind of throwing together a lot of different one-off music videos.
So the idea of videos was already in the works. Then that inspiration from MGK kind of was hey, this could be a different approach to the classic music video. Let's do something more creative with it that not a lot of people are doing or have done at all.
Mm-hmm.
I love writing short songs. A lot of my songs are really short. So to me, I definitely had already considered, particularly the idea that Overboard and Kind of Alone for the First Time kind of go together as a prequel and...
Right.
I guess it's not a sequel. If you have a prequel, it's the prequel and then the thing. But, once that idea of running down to the beach, I feel like that kind of started the process. I can't remember exactly where the throwing message in a bottle came from.
That kind of came from trying to not be too on the nose. So at the beginning of the film, there's a very obvious shot of Emmett's hand with his phone in his hand, and it's just a black screen with a reflection. And that's sort of to prime the viewer that the whole story is not an allegory, but symbolically, the message in the bottle is supposed to just be text messages back and forth, but we just thought that was boring. So that's kind of, going along with the theme of the beach. We had this like message in a bottle kind of idea kind of going on. So like the whole thing is essentially like he's trying to get messages out to this mystery person, and they're sending kind of mystery messages back. And it's like, it's sort of an analogy for just those late night text battles that you kind of get into when you're just desperate to like solve a problem with someone. And the neat thing about the 3 songs for the EP is that they really eloquently served as a 3-act structure for the film, which was kind of neat. So, the first song really sets up who are our characters, what's going on, what do you have to pay attention to, what's important. The second act is really where we see sort of some of our character development. We see Emmett, our protagonist, kind of unravel on the beach with some of his desperation and the lack of communication he's getting, and he gets kind of more frustrated. And then there's kind of not to spoil it or anything like that, but at the end of Act 2, there's a big a shift, in the narrative in terms of his position, his power position, and what he's trying to gain and how he's not able to gain it. So he has to kind of reset, and then in Act 3, we sort of have the resolution of all of the things that have kind of been building up for this character. He finally gets his message, and he's kind of deal with that, and his patience is sort of finally paid off by him not kind of pestering, and that's sort of paid off too. And so it really just it kind of wrote itself once we had the first 2 acts kind of done. I think we worked the hardest on Act 3 for the narrative in terms of trying to figure out like what is the result, like what is the resolution here, like what happens, and what's the payoff for kind of watching this. And having 3 songs just worked really well for the narrative. Like Emmett said, like the EP is only like 5 minutes, so the film's only like 8 minutes total from beginning to absolute end. So it's pretty palatable that way, and it serves as a fairly concise. It was a little hard to edit, honestly, because we had so many ideas and we had so much stuff we were trying to pack in that getting a really clean edit that didn't feel rushed and like hit all its beats while also like showing where everything came from too, like the portal that we had with the portal was a day of kind of decision. I still think that was like, you always got to leave something up for for last minute, because we didn't think of that. We didn't think of this like portal. We were just going to show the bottle just showing up on the beach, and he takes the message out of the bottle. But then we realized when we were filming that it was really hard to establish visually with the camera like where the bottle was supposed to be to show that like there is no bottle, now there's a bottle. So we came up with this idea literally on the beach of like, well, what if Emmett has to build like with like sticks and rock this little portal so that the bottle shows up in the portal, and then we can very clearly visually show that like the portal is empty. Now there's a bottle in the portal. So there's some fun stuff like that too, of just like once you get filming, you just kind of realize you can plan, but until you're actually doing it, there's always something you miss, and that was kind of a fun one that I think really benefited the film in the end.
Speaking of which, just because I do have some insider information, because I was lucky enough to be there and help with this. That leads into, I think, one of the very interesting adjust as you go lessons for this film of day of filming, which has to do with the beach. Do you want to just tell that story? I think that's so fun. And it's a good lesson in how do we adjust based on what we're given that we did not plan for or foresee at all with this.
Well, I'll say it started really well, and then it really went down. So, yeah, I think that's the big thing, is that when we were planning this, it was like the first time we were planning this, it was like the end of the summer. The second time, it was like beginning of spring. So, like, Emmett had scouted out the beach and scouted up a couple areas where we wanted to shoot. And, like, at those times, there wasn't a ton of people on the beach. So there really was no problem. But we ended up, just for, like, days off and things like that, we ended up shooting it Canada Day weekend, which we didn't realize, a lot of people probably go to the beach on that weekend. And it was a gorgeous
and it was beautiful.
It was a perfect weekend. So so we get down there so we actually shot the last scene first. So the very last scene where he wakes up on the beach, that's what we shot first. So we got there really, really early, picked out this great spot on the beach, that and there was like basically no one there too, because it was nice and early. So we were like, and it went really well. It was the first scene we shot, and it went really well. And we were like feeling really, really great about it. So our plan was to get there early and then go home and then go back in the afternoon, because that's when he's supposed to arrive at the beach. So we were kind of trying to do all the beach stuff sort of in one day. And so like we go out for lunch and we kind of charge batteries and get all packed up, and we head back. we can't even find parking. We can't find anything. There's nowhere to park within a reasonable distance. We cannot find a thing. So we look around, and I want to say we were like, okay, well, this is ridiculous. We don't have a ton of gear. We can get to our spot. Let's go home, order an Uber, and we'll just Uber there and then Uber back. Like, that sounds really simple. Yeah, perfect. So we did that.
I forgot that we did that. Yeah.
So then we walked back, and the beach is absolutely packed. There are just people everywhere. We cannot get back to the spot that we filmed at in the morning, which is creating a lot of anxiety, too, because we're like, oh, crap, like, he's going to be at a, like, what do we do? Because we have, like, this is where we filmed, so we have to, like, come back here, and, like, we liked our stuff. We didn't really want to reshoot that because we thought it went really well. So we walk, I want to say, like, 5 miles down. Like, we walked forever because Emmett kept being like, if we just go far enough, they'll thin out. If we just keep going down, they'll thin out. And we're like, okay. So we kept
usually true.
We just kept going down, and it just never thinned out. It thinned out for a little bit, but it was like a really rocky part of the beach. And so we were kind of thinking like, if we just shoot it right, maybe we can make it look like it's not like, it's like, maybe we can make it look like it's the same location, even though it isn't. And we just couldn't. And so we, like, pretty much production like halted there. So we had like five of us there, and we just don't know what to do because, like, we can't find a single patch of beach. So Emmett finally just goes for a run and keeps going down. And he calls us. He's like, I think I found a patch. And we found this tiny little patch that was right up by the water that just...
The one patch.
Yeah. There's one patch. And Emmett just, like, held down, like, spread out his arms. He's sitting there. He's like, no one come near this patch. Because that was the thing. It was like, we had to, like, throw these bottles. Emmett was going to be getting up and, like, running around. Like, it just, like, it was going to be so courteous for us if we just like invaded someone else's spot. And plus we got like this whole
sliding
camera
in the
rig
sand, like,
and
kicking up sand
multiple
everywhere.
people's, like, we have bounce boards, like all this stuff, and it's just like, like it's not right to ruin someone else's, like, day at the beach like that. So yeah, it was a real struggle to find the place. So anyway, eventually we find the place, and we kind of rewrote it as well too, so that, like, he would spend the day there, but then we would shoot him packing up and relocating at the end of the day, and then staying there for the night, because we figured once if we just waited long enough into the evening, eventually everyone would leave. And we got really lucky, and so that's what we ended up doing is we shot song 2 or act 2 all on this new beach location, which we were able to get and kind of make work. And then at the end of that, we ended up adding a transition scene where he basically packs up, looks kind of lost, and is just trying to get like a new environment so that to kind of reset himself. So we filmed him kind of going back down, and then we waited just long enough that as the sun was setting, enough people cleared out, and we were able to get the original location in the evening. So then we shot him also like setting back up in the new location, and we shot this really awesome time lapse. Actually, Emmett just sat there for an hour, literally. Emmett sat there for an hour while we rolled a time lapse. But it's so cool. I mean, it's one of my favorite shots.
It's really fun, actually.
Yeah, of just like, because the sun.
Nice to be able to sit there while the sun set.
The sun just like perfectly sets behind him, and the night kind of comes in, and it transitions between like Act 2 and Act 3 so perfectly. I'm really actually happy with it. So just a great example of like, oh my God, the problems we just kept running into with trying to film that. And you're just like, I don't know what to do.
I think it's really cool because that scene that you're talking about with him walking down the beach, and you managed to put that together in such a cool, like, I love that scene. That's honestly visually such a cool scene
because it breaks it up too. Like, it's just like you get a little moment of no music. I kind of added a lot of sound effects and a lot of ambient sounds and stuff like that, so there's a really nice just break in the film where you kind of just get to breathe because so much has been happening from the beginning up to this point. So it's a really nice rest, I think, and it just really kind of prepares you to go into the last song, which is the last act of the film. So yeah, but I honestly, it was one of those things where, like, if you just take a moment, take a breath, and don't panic, and just get creative, we put all of our creative brains together, and we found some solutions, and I think it really worked out for the best in the film, honestly, in the end.
So Emmett, I'm curious to know what your how it was for you filming and being in the lead role, which you weren't gonna be, and then you decided to be right at the kind of, again, it seems like a week before the thing. So how was that? How was filming, and from your perspective, and kind of being in that role? So you're the talent, plus it's your video, plus you're dealing with all these changes? Like, how was that?
Well, I mean, I think I was imposing most of the changes instead of dealing with, I feel a little guilty hearing you guys talk about all this stuff, but I mean, yeah. So for me, I mean, I wouldn't say I've like acted a lot before or at all, really, but I'm interested in it. It's pretty cool, and so I was definitely excited to try it, and pretty fun to take direction to just like try and act my best, because again, it's not exactly something I do, and so that was basically just like kind of a cool challenge. I think I was pretty shy about again, just like being in the spotlight at first, but it did end up making the most sense, particularly once we decided to do the live recording. Lately, I've been really drawn to the idea that, like, making a recording of a song is beautiful and important and vital, and absolutely not the end of the song.
Right.
You can continue on and should continue on and create like many more versions, continue recording it, continue evolving it, so it felt to me like that was a nice way of letting the songs keep being exciting and not like get stuck
Right.
in their recorded state.
So Malcolm, how was it for you then directing that kind of thing? Because you've done a million videos, but even this kind of a project is different from what you've done in the past as well.
Yeah, for me, it was building on a lot of skills I already had. It was just doing it in sort of a broader, wider kind of way. Like, I've done quite a few music videos with like some sort of a narrative where someone had to act, and I work with a lot of people that are familiar with acting but don't do a lot of acting per se. So I'm pretty used to trying to find creative ways of expressing like what I need from an actor. A lot of times I have a lot of experience with acting too, so a lot of times I just show by example. So I'm like, I need you to look nervous, and I will just act out for them how I would like them to look nervous. And then I kind of, I always like them to try it themselves first with just verbal direction, and then reinforced verbal direction, and then an example, just to really kind of give them a chance to explore it themselves first. I think that's always really important. Everything has to be a little bit more exaggerated than you think it is. Real drama exists in the close-up, and the closer you get, the less information you have to convey emotion to an audience. So like a lot of work with the eyes and your eyebrows, or, just these little movements have to be kind of exaggerated so that they because like Emmett said, it's almost like you think of it like the dynamic range is actually a lot more narrow than you think it is. Your little smirk has to basically be a smile, and it'll look like a smirk on film, so you have to kind of like shorten your dynamic range a little bit so that you can broaden it in the way it's actually interpreted thereafter, which is really neat. But no, Emmett was great though, because Emmett took the direction and he just kept trying. If I said sadder, he tried to get sadder. If I said, I remember there was a couple times where he was like, "This feels corny. Like I feel like I'm overacting or overdoing." And I'm like, no, it's not translating. Like, just bring it heavier, bring it bigger. It's an experimentation too, because like I said, when you're filming, so you're directing photography, you're filming, and you're directing actors, and also, managing the set and everything like that. It's a lot to kind of keep on your mind. But that's where it helped to kind of have a very focused story with really just one actor. So I feel like it got better as we went. But that was something I was a little nervous about, because I knew we logistically sort of had to shoot the last scene first. And I remember kind of going into that thinking like, this is a gamble. Like, me and Emmett haven't warmed up to each other about how we're going to do this, and how we're like, thank gosh we have this long like a relationship of working together, so we like understand each other really well, but we've never done this before. This specific task we have never done before. I might really ruin the film by making the big ending the first thing we shoot without kind of like warming up to this process. But luckily we did really rely just on our honest relationship, I think, and just trusting each other too, that if this is the direction we were giving each other, then that was the right thing. I think it came down to trust. And I think that's really what you have to have with your actors, is you have to have a lot of trust, and everyone has to kind of believe that everyone is doing their best and trying to deliver the best that they can. And I think that's how you get a really great product like this, something that is really meaningful and engaging, and something that people can connect with, because everyone's just giving their honest best effort.
Do you guys want to? Do you want to know something that I've not told you yet, because I was afraid it would infuriate you all?
Oh, dear.
Oh boy, what's that?
I was not for 1 second worried throughout the whole weekend when shit was hitting the fan on the beach. That's the thing, and I couldn't say it in the moment, because I knew how fucking stressed out you guys were, but we nailed that first scene, and I was like, everything's going to be fine. That was a high that I was able to ride for the whole weekend, despite, things went wrong, but that, that was a great way to start.
Well, and really, honestly, that was the worst of it, to be frank. The morning shoot, which was the last scene, went really, really well, and then that didn't go well, but then all of the running scenes went super well for Overboard. Once we were able to reclaim our spot on the beach for the evening and night, that all went super duper well. No problems there. So yeah, honestly, it all really worked out. It was just that was the big hiccup, was oh crap, we have nowhere to film the second main part of this whole thing. So but after that, it all kind of went well. And I'm really glad we did all the narrative stuff first, because we spent 2 or 3 days just shooting all of the narrative stuff, and then we had one full day to only shoot all of the music too, which we can talk about a little bit as well. Which I think was
it really 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, we did at least 2.
I guess 2 days.
Yeah, we did it all in 2 days, basically.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God.
The live off the floor thing, you mentioned, Emmett, that you had the band was in town, and you're like, this would be really cool to have and be able to do that. And you mentioned kind of letting the songs live and continue to kind of grow and evolve. Is that why you wanted to kind of add in this live off the floor element? Why throw a wrench into Malcolm's plans? No, why add that in there? Why, it's super neat, but how does that come about? Not a lot of people even think to try that.
Well, and my reasons may come across as petty, considering the amount of work that Malcolm put in and the size of the wrench that this tossed into it all. But in any case, that was one reason, I think, continuing to evolve the song, I guess, is something that just seems a bit more artistic to me. The band in question is also a band called Owen Wilson, which plays more hardcore kind of stuff. And we were kind of rehearsing and working on pulling together a bit of a recording that we had done before the pandemic, which you guys are both aware of. Basically, we were just rehearsing every day. Basically, Luke was living in the house because he was visiting from Japan, and this was he had just gotten there in April, so obviously we didn't have a lot of notice, but basically the band was rehearsing every fucking day, and I'm like, oh my God, we sound really good. I started to just feel a bit weird about asking these guys to mime it, which again, there's nothing against miming, there's nothing against traditional music videos, but we just sounded so good, I couldn't help myself. I got excited, and to me, again, I had all of these smaller reasons, and then it started to dawn on me this would be pretty different too, right, if we did this. This is something that maybe isn't done so much, and it is a lot of work. But it's I've said this before, but ultimately it just felt like the more artistic approach, and I guess as corny or pretentious as that may sound to some people, it's kind of what's the point of doing it any other way? Right. I mean, again, when the whole point of this release was to try and do something myself and to try and do something away from sort of that corporate release structure, why do anything so corporate. Why not go for as artistic as possible?
The other interesting part with that too is you also ended up mixing that live off the floor stuff as well. How was so you added to your own workload, frankly, as well.
I guess so. Yeah. And I want to just say Ian Cully mixed it mostly. Well, okay, I mean a collaborative mix.
It was definitely collaborative. I would definitely say it was collaborative.
Yeah. I did a mix, and then Ian kind of jumped in and did his thing with it, and we kind of listened back and really liked what Ian had done with it, and I kind of tweaked a couple of things from there. So that was something. It's cool. Ian and I have done that on, or we've at least talked about doing that on some projects in the future. And this was maybe the first time we've really actually gotten a chance to try it, other than a little bit on my upcoming record, but just kind of bouncing a mix back and forth and not being so concerned about like which one of us is the mixer, but it's been pretty interesting to do that a little bit. So yeah, that it did kind of add to the workload, but it's something that, I mean, I've talked about this with both of you a lot, like the idea of being a self-sufficient music creator is something that I think I can stand to work a little bit every day on. It's something that we're never maybe quite done. We're never quite good enough at. So that's another thing I thought is like, what is the point of this solo project if not a chance to develop my skills a little bit? Like if it's just like, ooh, look at how good these songs are, like, you know, that's selfish and that's not really helping me. I like my songs and I'm proud to show them to people, but at this point those songs are a few years old, and so I did want an opportunity to like grow and learn something from them.
And I think that's a really cool thing that you've used your solo stuff for, is experimenting and trying. Because I know when we made the first record, you and I, we went on a whole bunch of different tangents and tried this and like really produced it, and then went back on, let's make it a little more raw, and then and there's a lot of cool stuff that you do with your solo stuff. And I think you get to play more with your own stuff and experiment and try and go, doesn't matter if it turns out not great, I can either keep working on it or I learned from it. And I love it. So far, it all turns out amazing, I'm just going to say, but it's really cool to be able to have a project like that, to try different stuff and learn from it and see what works and what doesn't, and build skills from that. And frankly, as somebody on the sidelines too, it's cool to see what works and what doesn't from such a weird, different release that not a lot of people do. It's like, well, that's an idea, you know?
And it's been so fun to try that out. And I've often felt a little guilty in the past, as I'm sure I've talked to both of you about the amount of work I've caused both of you just from. But I hope, and I think you guys do understand. Like, it is kind of just from this desire, obviously, to try some different stuff.
If I may comment on that too, I remember this moment very distinctly because you texted me, you were like, "Hey, I hope you're well. Can we chat?" Or something like that. I was just like, and I just remember looking at this message from you. I'm like, son of a bitch, this isn't going to. Okay, he wants something. Something's changed, or okay. And I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to nip this in the bud. Let's call him right now. So I was like, yep, let me give me 5, and we called, and I this timid Emmett O'Reilly voice. Hey, so and so he asks me, and he says, like, I really want to do this. The band is here. I really don't want them to mime. I want to re-record everything live off the floor with the band. And there's a moment of silence as I contemplate I contemplate my life choices up to that moment. And I think what I said was, I mean, that's a lot of work, and that's really different. And then there was another silence where, like, Emmett couldn't tell if he needed to keep talking or not. But there's another silence, and then I just went, but damn, that's kind of cool. And I was and I just remember being so like torn between like logistically. I was like, we're doing this next week. Are you fucking kidding me? Like logistically, like my heart sank. It was a nightmare, but like I couldn't get it out of my head of just like,
that's cool.
but that's ambitious and that's pretty damn cool. Like, no, like who else does that, right? Like who else have you ever heard of that did a 3-song like music video essentially? That's a short film, and they re-recorded the tracks live off the floor. Like, come on, no one has the balls to do that. Like, and to that point too, no label would sign off on that. But like,
too much work,
money, or just time, but gosh darn it, the request came from Emmett O'Reilly, and so like artistically, it was too cool to turn down. Is really what it came down to. It's like regardless of how difficult it would be, regardless of the really cool ideas that we were letting go of, that I was still very much attached to, it was too artistically cool not to do. Basically,
I remember dropping that bomb, and there was probably it was a lengthy period, like maybe 20 seconds or so, where I was like, is he gonna kill me? Like,
it crossed my mind.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure. And I remember what you said, that eventually, like this, I don't know what it was about this, but the tension really cleared. You were like, God damn it, I wish it wasn't such a good idea.
I think that's what I said.
Okay. Yeah.
That's so
yeah,
good.
we're okay.
Well, I just want to end off here because you guys have been very generous with your time to chat about this. What are some of your the most fulfilling part of this project, and something like your biggest lesson from this project?
Yeah. Wow. Big questions. I think right off the bat, one of the most fulfilling things was just doing something on this scale, I guess, for me. When Emmett said he wanted to do like a short film of his EP, like that ambition really, I was drawn to that. And we rented some extra lenses for it, and we got all the gear together, and like we've said, we were in pre-pro for this project for basically over a year, just trying to get it all figured out and all laid out, and so that was really rewarding to me, was to finally kind of not finally, but to do a project on this scale. It's honestly made me want to do more projects on this scale. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not, but honestly, after having done it, I'm like, I'd like to start working with bigger crews and doing bigger types of projects like this, where maybe I'm just the director and I'm not everything.
Right.
I liked it a lot, and it kind of informed some of my decisions for a few projects that I did thereafter too, even just music videos, of just like this, the ambitious scale that I decided to go for them. That's kind of my... that's the thing I'm most satisfied by, was the fact that, we had this really ambitious idea and we went for it. And I really think it's quite unique. It's very, very cool. And I'm very proud to have done it. And it's kind of perfect too, because it's only 8 minutes long. Like, it's a short film.
Yeah.
Like, it's very palatable. I think anyone can watch it and derive meaning from it, derive, a personal experience that they can relate to. The big lesson learned is always just roll with the punches. Everything's going to change. The best laid plans of mice and men and such.
Yeah.
But at the same, but I still believe too that my methodology is always to over prepare so that I can pivot better. So yeah, a little bit of over planning doesn't hurt, but be ready for all of your plans to go to hell in a handbasket, and roll with the punches, and just be ready for anything. And two, that sometimes the things that don't go to plan inspire better ideas.
What about you, Emmett?
I'll start with the lesson.
Okay.
Take that, host.
To always, to always communicate as well as I can, and it's an effort for me and for all of us, I guess, to be our most communicative selves, and so for me to to mull over the gravity and the scale of this project was sort of a lot to take in, and there were a lot of ideas that I maybe sat on for a while to kind of figure out where I was at with them. For example, like how I felt about acting in it and all these kinds of things, as well as being communicative. It was a good lesson in like be a bit more decisive, because like these projects are for having fun and working with your friends anyway, What I was most proud of, actually, I my mind goes right back to a moment after the filming, which was when we were all sitting in the living room and we were betting on CPU Smash Bros. We just picked 4 Donkey Kongs, and I remember looking around the room and being like, "Yo, like three completely separate groups of friends of mine are here and pulled together to make this happen." And I was so proud of that. I was so proud of my friends and myself, I guess, to a certain extent. All of us, just like the amount of talent and dedication just for this like crazy little project was very awe-inspiring, and I was really proud of the way everyone pulled together with, some people had never met each other before, and it was so much, not only like so much fun, but so inspiring to just see the way everybody worked on it. And again, such a fun rap party after. That's the thing, just like thinking of that moment when everyone was just losing their minds cheering for these CPU DKs. I laugh every time. It's such a great memory. But it was just, I was so proud of this group of people that had assembled, I guess, because everyone was just so great.
Well, thank you guys for the chat about this. I think this is so cool. Such an ambitious project. Obviously, it was a lovely conversation and also a very fun weekend of filming and just being around such a creative group of people and a creative project, and is definitely very, very inspiring. So for those of you listening, if you haven't checked it out, the link will be in the show notes for this episode, but go check it out. Anxious Attachment. Thank you guys once again for coming on, and
thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
We'll chat with you guys later. I look forward to the next project and having you back on to discuss all of the things that come next.
Oh, we'll be back. Don't you worry.
Thank you for listening to that chat with Emmett and Malcolm. I hope you learned something to take away, some inspiration and some ideas. All the links for everything will be in the show notes, including the full Anxious Attachment film and the My Vacation record. Now, if you're a music producer or mixer or engineer yourself, and you're looking to get advice to take your productions to the next level, I do have mix feedback and personal one-on-one coaching available on my website, anakcreates.ca. Now, fun fact is the Anxious Attachment music video, the mixing for that record, was actually part of that coaching, and I did some coaching calls to help them take that mix to the next level. So go check that out and see if that would be helpful for you and your productions. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to anakcreates.ca/coaching. But that is it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, always be creating.